slowly letting it out, closing our eyes if we feel comfortable doing so. I want to read, it was yesterday's daily word, but I think it so hits home on this, what we'll be talking about tonight. The daily word was faith. The affirmation is, in good times and bad, I put my faith in God. If I feel overwhelmed by circumstance or unable to cope with my life or the world, I lean into my faith. Believing in the presence and power of God keeps me in the flow of life, blessed by divine grace and surrounded by divine protection. Faith is the key to peaceful, abundant living. Faith helps me rise above the shifting fortunes of the world, freeing me from the worry about suffering and insufficiency, and lack of supply. It helps me see the best in situations when it would be easier to see the worst. To believe in God means to trusting good will prevail. It means steadfastly holding the belief that faith, hope, and love are more powerful than despair, doubt, and apathy. I triumph over my troubles by relying on my faith in God. And from the Gospel of Mark, we read, Jesus answered them, have faith in God. Yesterday's daily word was faith. Dear Spirit, it's hard sometimes reading the news or watching it on television or radio, believing that all is well. But our co-founder, Myrtle Fillmore, said, look beyond appearances. And we do. And we do have that faith and can say that because God is, all is well. Thank you for this time to study Unity's 5 key principles. And thank you for our many, many blessings. And where there are challenges, help us to see these challenges as opportunities for more spiritual growth. And help us to remember those frogs, where frog stands for fully rely on God. And for this and so much more, we say thank you and amen and amen. Well, gosh, I wish, let me say how we got sort of out of sync, as it were. Ash Wednesday, Easter comes early this year. So Ash Wednesday is going to hit us very soon. So essentially we had starting last week, there were like 5 weeks before Ash Wednesday occurred. So, we started this series last Wednesday looking at Unity's first principle. Then we opened up on Sunday, but I wanted to talk about how we got these 5 principles. And it was so interesting to hear this, both the 9 o'clock and the 11 o'clock service. When I asked, when do you think Unity's 5 principles first came out? The 1890s, 1920s, wrong. Came out January. First time it was printed and published was January 1989. You could hear the reaction from the audience, from the congregation, but I thought there was an important lesson to learn how they came into existence, and important spiritual lessons, particularly about that. So many of us think that and I know I have, our opportunity to be of love, service, and remember is going to come with an engraved invitation. And a lot of times it comes when we least expect it in ways which we never would have thought. And then I also talked about the Bert Lahr principle, Bert Lahr being the actor who starred in The Wizard of Oz. He was the Cowardly Lion. And Bert Lahr not only did he did a lot of Shakespeare. He was a star in one of the early productions of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. He was also the star of Lay's potato chip commercials. If you remember, Bet You Can't Eat Just One. And Bert Lahr's theory was whatever acting assignment he had, he gave it his all. He gave the Lay's potato chips commercial the same oomph, the same whatever that he gave to Macbeth or the Cowardly Lion. And I take away that a lot of times that's important, because you never know when this, you never know when your greatest opportunity to be of love, service, and remember is going to be there. And the other is that I think the Apostle Paul was really right when he said, whatever we're doing, we're really serving God. We're really serving Spirit or our higher power or our higher self, and to remember that. So this week on Sunday, I'm going to be then moving to the first principle, which we looked at last week. This week we're going to be looking at the second principle, which will happen a week from Sunday. I'm sorry that we're off kilter, but I didn't, I couldn't wave a wand and push. Maybe I should have said we're celebrating this year the Eastern Orthodox calendar, and it's a week later. So anyway, I don't think I would have got that through. Ellen Davenport has the writing of the second principle. Human beings have a spark of divinity within them, the Christ Spirit within. This is the very essence of God, and therefore they are inherently good, because we have this essence which is divine inside of us. The kids' version has, I am naturally good because God's divinity is in me and in everyone. And if you go to the kids' youth and family ministry room, I didn't realize this because I never really looked at what was on the door. There are the 5 principles on the door. And the first principle they have, God is good. Second principle, and so are we. So, puts it, I think, very, very nicely and concisely. If I could tell you my experience with it, and I think I'm not alone with this. I came into Unity in the mid-1980s, and was, eventually when they came out, I was exposed very quickly to, the five principles, and got the booklet or book that was first published on it, the Keys to the Kingdom, and really got a lot out of that, which went over Unity's 5 principles. So check, first principle, check, got that. Second principle, check, got that. So intellectually, got it very, very quickly. The problem is getting it on a heart level. So and the trouble is sort of produces sort of results, as it were. And the question is, does it really give you the energy when the crisis hits, when you hit that pothole, and life is not the good. You learn Buddha's 4 Noble Truths, or the 10 Commandments, or Unity's 5 principle. It doesn't mean that life is the good ship lollipop, because I really do believe that no one comes through this thing called life unscathed. We all go through various crises, and it's kind of my scathing was worse than your and it's not going to get you, not going to get me too far. So anyway, it's now 2009 or 2010, and I really feel the call to ministry. And lo and behold, I feel Spirit saying, go for it. It was funny. And again, Unity Village, located right outside of Kansas City. So I really felt God saying, go for it. I was an economist at the time, two very, very nice paychecks from two different sources in Washington. Going for the ministry made no rational economic sense whatsoever, but I felt it was the right thing to do. So I get to, we're about ready to drive to Kansas City for admissions week, meaning we're going to be tested and we're going to have to go through interviews. I have to go. It was interesting to become an economist. Nobody checked out whether you were sane or not. But I mean, to become a minister, they're really big on you being sane. They gave me a battery of psychological tests, and then had to go through several psychologists at the village. But anyway, it dawned on me that God had said, "Go for it," but He didn't say I was going to get it. And on the street you saw that a lot of time. I mean, in Unity they don't call you rejected; they call it redirection. And that a lot of people going for the ministry get redirected, and I thought, well, it could happen, or what, And then I thought, there's no more that I can study because I'm going to have to take some more tests out there. I've studied, I've done all the things, I could do everything I could do. So I'll just sit back and listen to some music before we head out to Unity Village in Kansas City. So I went to, in those days I had Pandora, so I pull up Pandora on my phone and click it. To play rock and roll, and up comes, I kid you not, Little Richard singing, "Going to Kansas City, here I come, going to Kansas." I thought, wow, that's that's a wonderful, that's a wonderful sign. But even before that week, before they would even consider my application, you had to take in those days, and I think it's still roughly the same. You had to take 15, or I think it was 15 or 16. Courses, in those days it was called Spiritual Education and Enrichment C classes. And the first C class which I took was The Christ in the Bible. And fortunately it was online. It was an online course, so I could take it while I was in Virginia. And it was given by a wonderful minister by the name of Tom Thorpe. And I learned something this weekend at Phil Pearson's celebration of Phil Pearson's life, which I never knew. Tom Thorpe was an assistant minister under Phil Pearson for a while. I never knew I had that as it were indirect connection with Phil Pearson, was just because Tom was one of the best teachers I had. So anyway, the class is The Christ in the Bible, and it goes through, the Old Testament. And a lot of this I knew because of, my adopted by a Jewish family. I knew, the Jewish, ancient Jewish conception of what a Messiah was, and restoring the throne of David, and et cetera, driving the Romans out of the Holy Land and all that. And that Jesus came with a very different concept of what Messiahship or Christship would mean, et cetera. And yes, I was definitely, I'd have no problem using the term the Christ within, and that divine spark and all that. But there was one of the weeks for the homework where we were to write about what we really honestly believed about this Christ within. And so I started writing, and what I came up with is that, I believe there's this Christ within me, Buddha nature within me, higher self, divine spark within me. But there are a lot of things inside of me, and the Christ within is just another one of the things that is within me. And then it dawned on me, and this, big awakening or whatever, that the Christ within, the Buddha nature within, that divine spark within, wasn't just another thing that was inside of me. It was, as it were, the big enchilada. It was the central principle. And the analogy which came to me, because I also had been reading a lot about Carl Jung and Jungian, like in Jungian and Carl Jung and in the system, there's something, usually in English translations, it's defined as the self, and it's put capital S, and that's an archetype. And in the Jungian system, the self is the archetype of archetypes. It is the archetype of which all other archetypes sort of arrange themselves around. And it dawned on me, I got the, wow, that Christ within, that divine spark within, it's not just another thing inside of me. Call it what you will. It's not just another thing inside of me. It is like the self. It is, as it were, the divine archetype of archetypes, and everything else inside sort of arranges around that. And that's who I really am. That's my essence. It really, so instead of it, I mean, came in the mid-1980s, and now it's 2010, finally getting this sense of, wow, the Christ within is really my true essence. That is who I am. Not, vice president of research at United Way, or holder of a doctorate, or a resident within a corner office, or so many other ways of defining oneself. That is my true essence, and that a lot of times, did I always shine at that level? Well, the answer is, and we'll talk about, if there's that divine spark and the goodness and all that, how come we see so many stinkers in the world? And we'll talk about that. But that's my true essence. And that there were certain corollaries from that which I really, honestly, truly started to feel. One is that that in many ways what I had really always longed for and was so striving for, and I really am a type A and all that, I already had. That what I was really looking for is that peace that passes all understanding, and that comes from the Christ within, and I already had it. And it just really struck me. I already have what I really, truly have been, longing for, and I felt it at a very deep level. And I can't say I feel it every day at that intense level as I did writing that essay, but it's a fundamental truth which I do believe in, and which I go back to, that honestly, truly is. That truly, honestly, truly is who I am, and that it's not conditional on anything. It can't be taken away from you. That it's not something which some organization gives to you. It's not something you finally earned the degree, and now you have the Christ. That it was your birthright and something that you were born with. And then I started to feel, because a lot of times I think I have felt myself in the past almost like a dog under the table, and maybe Master will throw some, maybe Master will throw some scraps, and if you're lucky or whatever, and started to think, no, I am a member of the divine family. I sit at the table. I have all the rights and responsibilities that any member of the divine family has. And it's not a question of that scraps are going to be thrown under the table. The meat of metaphysical roast beef, as it were, is going to be passed my way, and I can just take a fork in and take what I want, take what I need. And that was an incredible experience to finally come away with that sense of a Christ within. So I guess opening up, Your feelings, I mean, about that divine spark, have you felt that, or where do you stand on that? Or how would you define, I feel comfortable with the concept of the Christ within, but I mean, not every, again, growing up in a Jewish home, I did not have nuns rapping me over the knuckles, and I didn't have, I never had a hellfire brimstone Protestant preacher tell me I was going to, if I stepped on a crack, I was going to go to hell. Or if I didn't see things his way, and it probably wasn't him, I would go to hell for all eternity. So I didn't experience that, but I can know why a lot of people who have experienced that and things like that might feel. And I'm not defining it in terms of the Christ within. It's something. It's something else. So I'd be interested in hearing how you define that divine spark inside of you. How you felt with it? What do you think your reaction is? And the other thing which I would also add from Unity, there's a very famous picture which is taken from Revelation. In the book of Revelation, Jesus is put down as saying, behold, I knock, whoever opens the door and lets me in, I'll come and have supper with you. And early on my Unity walk, several Unity ministers said, it's not so much Christ is out there and open the door and he'll come in, he, she, it will come in. It's that it's already inside, it's not coming in, it's already inside of us. And the name of the game, they go back to Robert Browning's, the poet Robert Browning, is his concept of the imprisoned splendor. It's a question not of letting it from outside come in. It's a question it's already inside of you, and now letting it come out from. It's already sitting at the table. It's already inside you. Letting it come out, coming it out and shine. So, there's a saying: nobody likes to speak first. Who would like to speak? Sure, good, George.
Yeah, well, I would say that divine spirit within, for me, feels situational. I mean, I know there are times when it shows up, but I can't really put my finger on that. I either had an experience that's within me, and then that always stays with me. It's almost like the conditions have to be right, and they're not always. Well, they're not up to me. I guess it's my higher power sometimes puts me in a place where it's like I feel like, oh yeah, my higher self is at work here. But I'll be honest with you, it's, I'm not aware of it as much as maybe I could be. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yeah.
I think when I felt it the most was when my husband died, and he died fairly suddenly. And I was sad, but it was like, not sad like I thought I'd never see him again, or I didn't know where he went. I felt like someone inside of me was taking care of that and helping me to deal with that and go on and do the things I had to do. I wanted to make a comment, though. I had never heard before where she talks about the four parts of a human being.
Could you?
4 parts of a human being: the body, the soul. The body, the ego, the soul, the spirit. I had never heard that the spirit and the soul being differentiated. I guess I always thought the soul was sort of the part of God in me. So it makes sense the way she says it, but I had never. I thought that was different.
I would, but and when one of the things let me start over. Joseph Campbell is one of my heroes, and Joseph Campbell believed that whatever we say about the divine is more than that. And so whatever we say about the divine, he called it a mask. At best, we can create a mask or a simplistic model, as it were, of what the divine really is. And so, you know, some people, Ken Wilber talks about the three faces of God, and somebody else might talk about the five, whatever. And to realize that these are models. A lot of times, you know, models can be extremely useful. I mean, I wouldn't want I wouldn't want my GPS to show me literally everything from here to my house. It's a simplified version, but can be very useful. The story which comes back to me, Gertrude Stein, the critic and artist from Paris of the 1920s. Picasso painted and it's interesting, a lot of times when people think of Gertrude Stein, the two things they'll probably remember, what did she look like? They'll either think of there's a famous picture of her with her partner, Alice B. Toklas, or Picasso's picture of Gertrude Stein. So Picasso paints a picture of Gertrude Stein, and Gertrude Stein looks at it and says, "But Picasso, I don't look like that." And Picasso said, "Don't worry, Gertrude, you will, you will." You know, so I think models can be very useful and also, you know, can help us see directions and stuff. But the reality is much more. I certainly know this is true in economics. I mean, the best we can produce are simplistic models, and reality is much more wonderful and everything else than that. So I do really feel that whatever we can say about the divine, it is a mask. It is like Joseph Campbell said, a mask, and a partial view, and probably a partial view of what came to mind. God, with all this in the news, a lot of times when you see pictures, maps of Greenland, I mean, it's bigger than Canada. It's the biggest island, but it's not, you know, it's not that big. And the reason because you're when you start projecting a globe onto a flat surface, it makes things at the poles look like a lot larger. And so I think whatever we can say about the divine is more like projecting Greenland, you know, on a map. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make a political comment. Anybody else? Yes, Janet.
I was raised Catholic, and one of the things that did not sit with me very well was before you went up to receive communion, you would profess that you are not worthy that God should come under your roof. And from a very young age, I knew that was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that I have that divine presence within. Do I tap into it? Do I express it always? Do I know it's always there? No, I don't. I do go through some struggles with that. I loved in the book where I think it's this chapter, where she was comparing the divine within us. Each and every one of us is like a wave in the ocean.
Yeah.
The ocean is God, divine presence, and we all make that essence, that being there. And that's something that I could wrap my logical brain around. I can accept that so much better than saying I am God, or I am divine. But when I look at it from being a wave in the ocean, I'm part of the ocean. The ocean is me. So that made it so much more palatable and easier for me to accept my divinity.
Thank you, Janet. Let me read the section Janet's referring to. It's on page 40, where Ellen writes, "It took years for me to understand a new concept of self in which I am an expression of God. It helped when I formed a new concept of God that is both transcendent as all there is, everywhere, and immanent, personal within. The best example I know to describe our divinity compares humans to God like waves to the ocean. Each of us is a distinct as a wave, yet made up of precisely the energy and attributes of Mother Ocean itself. We are not the whole ocean, but we are the same composition, nothing more or less, part of the divine flow. Pam, do you want to? Yeah.
Well, I was thinking that for me, there have been moments of time where I seem to have that clarity of spirit within, that I am spirit, that I am part of this universal presence. And then it just goes, and sometimes I think it's like putting on glasses, and oh, there it is, and the glasses go away, and I'm back on to, the issues of the day, whatever problems du jour, whatever. And then I was thinking when you're talking about the water, that it's almost like water, dipping your hands in, it's, oh, I've got it, and then it just kind of slips through your fingers. It's like, wait, where did it go? At the end of the day, when it's all quiet and you're reflecting, it's like there's those moments that seem to have clarity, but hanging on to them has been a real challenge.
Yeah. Thank you, Elaine.
I always didn't understand what they meant by having a divine spark in you. And so I don't think it's a coincidence I'm here, because just last night I was watching this show that I like to watch, which is Gaia, and that's the only show I mainly watch, and sometimes Prime Video. And there's this Jewish guy that's promoting that he calls it TLS, the light system, and he was explaining what that is. He says it's your unique expression inside of you, even though we're all one. And so I finally understood what people mean when they say that.
Mm-hmm. Well stated. Anybody else? And, it's one of the things which I think makes New Thought and Unity different, really on a key point, very, very different from how Christianity is usually taught. Most branches of Christianity and Western religion is that somehow Jesus was this unique exception, that divine, that he had a secret sauce inside of him, which is not in anybody, not in anybody else. And quite frankly, if that were the case, and if Jesus were a one-off in 2,000 years ago, the question really is, what the hell does that have to do with my living here in 2026 in Sacramento? Not, it was a one-off a long time ago, and I can't obtain it, and it doesn't, it doesn't seem so important to one's life. But in Unity and New Thought, our concept is that the same, Jesus, it wasn't just that Jesus had this secret sauce, that the same secret sauce that was in Jesus is in you and you and you and also inside of me. And that Jesus was not the exception, he was the example. That he was the example. And Ellen writes, this is what Jesus tried so many times to tell us and show us. Jesus was demonstrating what is possible for human beings when they are fully aligned with the presence of God within. He was able to love and forgive, heal and teach, because he was living from his God self, or the Christ present within him. And he said we could do the same thing. In the Gospel of John, he says, greater things shall you do. Now, I believe I have the same essence inside of me that was inside of Buddha, that was inside of Jesus. I also believe that Jesus and Buddha were much better chefs than me. But then I go back to Julia Childs. One time when Julia was making a souffle, she had this souffle, and literally it fell on the floor. She took it out of the other side, and it just fell on the floor. And without a moment of hesitation, she looked at the camera and said, "When making a souffle, practice, practice, practice." And so that we have, we have that opportunity to practice, but we have the same. We have that same, inherent nature, and that's that same power. And what Ellen says, and I agree with this, the same divine essence in Jesus also dwells in each one of us, imperfect as we are. And the other analogy which I would make is, it's been very foggy around here lately. Does that mean the sun has ceased to exist? No, the sun still exists. It's that clouds are covering it up. And we'll talk a little later about what those clouds are that might be covering us up from really feeling that intense link with the divine and acting as if we had the divine spark within us. I had an experience very recently. We have a wonderful woman who is not even in this state. But she's very active. I mean, she's responsible for, I know, for editing my blog and doing a lot of Samantha Pennington, and wonderful woman. I've never met her face to face in person, but we're seems almost 2 or 3 times a week we're on the phone or FaceTime or whatever. So this week's column that was printed, it's on the growth of Orthodox Christianity has been just booming. I mean, just really, really booming. And what has made a big change is young men who usually have not attending church. They're really, honestly, truly attending church. And so I used research from Pew Charitable's Trust, which is very reputable, and the New York Times. It was the New York Times. In their article, they point out that a lot of these Ortho bros are also white segregationists and sort of to the right of MAGA, even. And I had this in the article and several other things. And the first reaction, Samantha said, I really want to hold this column. I don't want to go with it. I don't want to go with it because it's really... it's incendiary in many ways, and et cetera. My initial reaction was, this is New York Times. This is New York Times. This is Pew Charitable Trust. This is really reputable research. I have all this experience. Who the hell are you? I'm the senior minister and blah, blah, blah. This divine voice, as it were, went inside of me. Listen to her. She has much more experience about online stuff than you do, kiddo. Listen to what she is saying. So we talked. I listened to what she, and I opened up and listened to what she was saying. And she asked me, "Do you know what doxing is? Do you know what?" And she gave me several examples and I said, "But this is Sacramento. I mean, this, She said, "No, when you put something online, it's forget geography. Yeah, these people might be in Selma, Alabama, or whatever, but they'll pull it up and this, that, and the other." And I contrasted the Ortho Bros to Next Gen and what we're doing here in anyway. What came out of me, I said, "You know what? Why don't we make edits? I'll send it to Lisa Lawson, see what she thinks and edits she wants to make. Why don't you make edits?" Came out of my mouth, "Samantha, I give you. It's up to you. If you think this should go through after we edit it, let's go through with it. If you don't think it should go through, you have the final say-so," which was so different from how I thought before. And Samantha said, no, I don't want to kill it, but I think it does need edits. And so we went through, did the edits, and came up finally with what And so my initial reaction, I mean, there were a lot of I'm the boss, I'm the this, that, and that. And I mean, I don't know where that thought came from, saying to Samantha, you make the final decision about whether this should go through. If you think it should go through, let's do it. If you don't think, if you want to kill the column, no problem, kill the column. And it's, I think, coming into touch with that. Do I always come into touch, do I always come into touch with that? Not as much as, that was really a good day. And so I remember going to a Krishna Das concert where Krishna Das said, do I always make these perfect reactions? No, but I believe eventually I will. If I keep working this stuff, if I keep doing my spiritual disciplines, I will be more and more in touch with that divine spark. I will be able to realize even on foggy days, he didn't use fog, I think it was rainy days, but on foggy days, I will be able to remember that the sun is still there and to realize that by 9 o'clock, the fog's going to burn, the fog's going to burn off. I see, yeah.
That just reminds me of, most of you know that I do a quantum living course here, and especially the discussion that we just had about us being the individual wave in the ocean. And also I like the distinction as well of the spirit and the soul, because to me it's like there's a divine spirit in me, which is the God essence as we've been talking about, but I'm an individual soul that's ever advancing. And so I think what we're talking about here, I too was raised Catholic, and then there's this view of, yes, we're all children of God, but there's Jesus. Jesus was fully divine, was fully human, but he was fully divine. But the way they taught it was that was what made him different. What I realized in unity was, no, Jesus was saying we're all fully human, and we too are fully divine. And then, to me, that is the essence of the Quantum Living Course, is that we are fully human, our shadow side, of whatever I'm trying to get over. I'm unlovable, I'm a mistake, I'm yada, 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 yada. But on the other side, that I am a unique expression of the divine, and my gifts may be, I'm joy-filled, I'm enthusiastic, and so that's the spirit of who I am. And as Rick was saying, me too, on an everyday, it's, am I showing up as my divine version, or as what's leading me, my human experience? And what I love is we don't have to get rid of our human experience, because our human experience is what the unique spark of the divine is. And it's a wholeness. It's a wholeness of saying, I am this way in how I show up, and I might have gotten off track of who I am because it's the human common condition, but if I can remember that side, that what makes me uniquely, my unique expression of the divine. For some people, it's their creativity, and some people are artists, and some people are business, and people are wonderful healers and lovers, but I don't have to compare to any of you. I get to be my individual wave and my individual soul expression, and then I get to integrate that it's okay to have this side of me, because Jesus was fully human, and when I'm having that human moment of my ego and all that other stuff, I have a choice to be more of the expression of the divine spirit of who I am, the essence of the whole. And I don't think I had that clarity. I know I didn't have that more of a clarity until I started getting into unity principles. These past years, these types of books have given me that perspective, my own unique perspective on that.
Thank you. Well, we could. Mm-hmm.
Could you explain doxing? I don't know what it is.
Explain.
Doxing, you were talking about your article?
Doxing. How, Elaine, you want to give a?
I'm not.
I would say essentially exposing. Reverend Rick Belous lives at 9310 La Diana Court. Let's go there and set off foghorns, or His 11-year-old daughter goes to Enda Beatty Elementary School. They get out at 2:50. Why don't you go? Why is your father such a, if your father really believed in God, how can he believe that homosexual marriage is anything but sin and going to take you to, that would be doxing. Or outside sun. It wasn't online stuff, but when I was a minister at Lynchburg, I easily got one person a month coming in because we had Black Lives Matters on a banner on the front, and also the rainbow flag on the front too. I mean, how can you call yourself a minister and so? I thought, it's possible some Sunday somebody's going to come in with, an AK-47 and that's, So anyway, but it didn't happen. So anybody else? I love it. Ellen writes, and I'm on page 43, over the years, I have come to a visceral understanding that spirit is who I truly am, as the image and likeness of God, and that I have all the attributes of God latent within me. Knowing that I can rely on divine self is not an exaggerated sense of my own powers. It is just the opposite. It is a humble turning to the divine within for insight and wisdom. It is discovering God to be closer to breathing, nearer than my hands and feet. The point of spiritual growth, then, is to know myself as spirit and express it in my life. I think she does hit the nail on the head with that. So then the question comes, if that's the case, how come there's so many stinkers? How come we're going through, what we're going? And I think the Fillmores also had good explanations for that, that there is something called error thought, which such as scarcity, lack, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. If something good happens, this was the one my family, if something good happens, it's bound to be taken away. I mean, the other shoe is going to drop. Nothing good lasts, everything bad does, I mean, those kind of error thoughts. And when we're in that, we usually are in fear and resentments. And if that's the case, it does block us off from being at the top of our spiritual. If it is, it blocks us off at being at the top of our spiritual game. If I could think of, with error thought really clouding my thinking, I could see that situation with Samantha going quite differently, and to the point she calls Elaine and says, I love working with everybody else, but that new ministry you have, forget it. I don't need to put up with such garbage. Here's my resignation. So I mean, so I do think that a lot of folks, and probably all of us at times, error thoughts do creep in, and that blocks us off from being, spiritually all we can be. Neil Donald Walsh oh boy, there was reaction. He was asked, do you really think there was a divine spark inside of Hitler? And he answered, yes, I do feel there was a divine spark inside of Hitler. It was so blocked up with so much crud, that, it was blocked off with so much crud, but I do believe there, even Hitler had that divine spark inside of him. That got him in a lot of trouble. But quite frankly, I say this even giving my Jewish roots, I believe that, that to be the case. And so I think a lot of times it's error thoughts which block us off from revealing and being in line and sync with that, that full Christ potential. But as we start working spiritual disciplines, we'll get to the fourth principle down the road about prayer and meditation. And I believe it is so important to have a daily routine of prayer and meditation. And it doesn't have to be 3 hours of the Baltimore catechisms or, formal whatever, or Tibetan book. You have to read 40 pages of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I mean, it can be very simple. It can be very, it doesn't have to be as long as War and Peace, but to have that discipline on a daily basis, I think is so important. I know it is for me, because I do need to muck out that stable or to weed that garden. I do not tend to wake up Mr. Spiritual. It a lot of times is not my go-to default position. But by doing these spiritual disciplines, I can realize when I'm starting. There's a gyroscope inside of me, and you see a lot of times missiles taking off or rocket ships taking off, and the gyroscope sort of brings it back into alignment onto the path where it needs to go. And I do find there are more times where that gyroscope pulls me back, or I'm a lot quicker in understanding, God, Rick, you're starting to fall into self-pity, you're starting to fall into fear. And the trouble is, when you do that, you can't really enjoy it when good things happen. A friend of mine, a woman friend, and I think the movie was Arthur, about the drunk. Yeah, it was Arthur, that one. Her uncle was the producer of Arthur. And the irony is, from what I gather from my friend, her uncle never enjoyed the success of Arthur. He never felt it or enjoyed it, because all through it he thought, well, I've had a great hit with Arthur. I'll never be able to do it again. I'm a one-hit wonder, a one-trick pony, a flash in the pan. And he was not able to enjoy that, winning the Academy Award. He was so in fear, so much that way. The brightest person I ever met was a man by the name of David Schramm, who was an astrophysicist at University of Chicago, cosmologist. His big thing was dark energy and dark matter. Every time I met David, I would ask him, how much of the universe do you think is made up of dark energy, dark matter? Oh, around 70%. Next time I had lunch with him, how much now? He said, around 85%. And finally it went up to, over 96% he felt was dark energy, dark matter. He had an airplane and the airplane's name was Big Bang. And unfortunately it crashed and unfortunately killed David. At his funeral, Stephen Hawking was not able to attend, but Stephen Hawking wrote the eulogy, and I think there's a good chance they don't give out Nobel Prizes to people who died. You have to be alive, and so David never won the Nobel Prize, and I could see every time the Nobel Prize committee came out for physics, and he was not named. You could see this sense of failure, that I'm sort of somehow a second-rate whatever. And everybody I know looked at David Schramm as this incredible teacher, mentor. Having a loving. It was a beautiful. It was a beautiful love relationship he was in. Such a successful life, but he never. I don't think he felt it, because, he didn't win the Nobel Prize. And the irony of that is, a few years after he died, I was, this is my economics days, I was at the American Economics Association convention, annual convention And in walks Robert Solow from MIT. He had just won the Nobel Prize in economics for his pioneering work in growth theory. And he walks in, he was late, he couldn't find a seat, so very humble man, he just sits down on the floor, like a grad student. And I'm looking at him and thinking, wow, Nobel Prize winner. If I won the Nobel Prize and I was sitting on the floor like him, I'd be levitating off the floor. But then I thought, you know what? If I won the Nobel Prize, I'd be thinking to myself, well, gosh, nobody remembers who won the Nobel Prize in 1996 and 1997. I mean, yeah, I won the Nobel Prize, but I'm just another humdrum Nobel Prize winner. I'm no Karl Marx, I'm no John Maynard Keynes, I'm not an Adam Smith. I'm sort of second rate. And thinking that even when you get in that mental framework, even if you win the Nobel Prize, you're going to beat yourself up for something. And it just struck me. But when you have that I find when I do really truly feel that connection with the divine spark within, and I feel it. It is not every minute, but it's growing. And when I do feel it, it's like you've already whatever you were hoping to win with the Nobel Prize, you've already won it. You already have that prize, and it's something which can't be it's something which can't be taken away from you. And the neat thing is that there are ways of dealing with our error thoughts. I think Reverend Gary Simmons and Reverend Jane, with their method of like doing shadow work, the Q process, and we're going to be giving a Q class. Elaine's going to be running it. There are ways of getting at this stuff. It's progress, not perfection. And I do see that there are changes things which would have made me really buggy and sent me over the cliffs, doesn't. It's not so much that it does it now. Peg complimented me a little while ago about, God, you seem to take these things really well and much better than you did when I first met you. And I said, yeah, the lobotomy really has started to kick in. Joke. Comments about error thoughts, experiences dealing with error thoughts?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Sure.
Yeah, it kind of goes back, it was in the chapter, but one of the things I'm aware of as, just biologically and as a species, how our brain is organized. And I think she talks about kind of our survival limbic part of our brain, which, of course, evolved before our thinking, kind of prefrontal cortex parts of our brain, where I think when you're in survival, you're kind of cut off from these higher functioning parts of your brain. And I think that's where things like what we're talking about, divine spirit and all of these kinds of notions and ideas, I believe they don't come from the limbic part of the brain. They don't come from survival. And like I say, evolutionary, they were developed before this other part. And so for me, I think that's kind of makes it easier to understand why I might not have access to that part. Because when I'm in fight, flight, or freeze, or anger, or whatever, I am not thinking about my highest self because I have no connection to it. And that's biologically. That's how we're wired.
I would agree. I'm right now in the process of really reading and studying the work of a woman by the name of Sarah Payton, Peyton, not the Republican candidate for former vice president. Sarah Payton, a different, who's very interested in both spirituality and in latest in neuroscience. and plasticity and the ways of that it is possible through things like shadow work and other things to start reprogramming the brain so that the amygdala and parts of the limbic system don't run, really don't run wild. It was a great system when there were saber-toothed tigers, but there are not too many saber-toothed tigers in the Sacramento area. And to be able to, the example which I brought up, I think in the past might have really said, with Samantha, my God, this is a threat on my authority. I have to establish, who I am and my authority and all that. And the voice inside the sort of frontal cortex saying, she knows so much more about online stuff than you do. Listen to her before, listen to what the heck she has to say, which was really crucial. And I think when we start doing that way and bringing that part into it, it's easier to deal with the error thoughts and easier to get to a system where we can, really do appreciate that Christ within.
And I would just say this, once again, getting back to these brain structures, the limbic system processes experience about 10,000 times faster than,
Yes.
than the cortex.
Yes.
So that's a challenge.
I do spiritual direction with Robert Brummett, Reverend Robert Brummett. His probably most famous book is Finding Yourself in Transition. And he always points out to me that biologically the brain was not constructed to make you happy. It was constructed to make you survive, to help you survive. Or it wasn't, necessarily for spiritual wisdom. It was, because rather you take the mallet and crush 1,000 things that really weren't against you, as opposed to not crush the one thing that really, was really opening its jaws and about to close you in. But I'm so struck by the work of Sarah Payton that there are ways of reprogramming. There are ways of bringing more of that frontal lobe system. She talks about that compassionate self and going back to old traumas. She really believes in something called compassionate time travel, where you can go back to, so you were sexually abused, so this happened or that happened, which was traumatic or whatever, that of way of going back to that trauma or that difficult situation, time traveling, and to deal with it that you're no longer that little child. You can go back and I just really find her work really amazing. But I think the key thing to take away is that there is neuroplasticity, that we can reprogram, and you can see it. I mean, the brainwave studies they do of people who are really serious meditators and are really serious in spiritual. You can pick them out. I mean, you can honestly see here are 10 people, 9 of them are been meditating for, X number of years. One of them's just put in as doesn't know meditation from the New York Yankees. And you can pick out, the difference in brainwaves. You can pick out that one. So the positive notion is that there are ways of and it's progress, not perfection. There is ways of doing this out, and I think one of the key ways is doing that shadow work. Elaine, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think this just, as we come to close to the end of our evening, it's such a beautiful segue to the next principles of our thoughts create our realities, right? So it's the stories we tell ourselves, or when something happens in the past, I love what you say about how we react, and it's if you're not conscious to remember or aware that your body in a split second just went into fight mode. So it becomes the part when you feel the body reacting because you are disconnected. There was no decision in that reaction. That is a physical response to either something is attacking you or in your story, in your mind. And I found that the self-compassion of saying it's a good thing in the sense that your body is willing to be wrong 99% of the time to protect you. So if the hose is a hose in the backyard is coiled up and you walk out and it could potentially be a snake, your reaction is going to be, and it doesn't care every single time. So a person makes a comment or Samantha says something, and in your mind there's a potential danger or something. 99% could be wrong, but you're going to react in a way to be protective of yourself. Does that make sense? So when we start realizing that, then all of a sudden it's like, darn, it makes you at some point go, how do you take control? And it's when you realize if you're showing up and you're doing your best you can, but yet how you're showing up in the world isn't really working for you. Whether it's the relationships I'm trying to be in or my interaction with my coworkers, it's just I keep having no control of how I'm showing up, then that's the time to look, because the deeper secret, as Reverend Rick says, is you don't even know what those untold stories that is there until you stop to say, how did I dissect that? How did I get from 0 to 100 miles an hour? And then that's when you do the work. Does that make sense? It's such a beautiful thing.
I don't need the microphone. I'm missing what you said about the garden hose.
Oh, so I was, no problem. So I was saying that I just want to honor what was being said about you react and you're not even conscious about it. It just happens. And so if there was and your body is there to protect you for a good thing. So it will react always to protect you, even if 99% of the time it's wrong. So if it's a garden hose and you step in the backyard, you're going to react because there might be a 1% chance, even if you just looked at it, that it was a snake.
Oh.
Does that?
Snake part.
Yeah, so that's kind of the idea, and yet we react to different people or react to situations, and we have a really inappropriate reaction and potentially, quote unquote, a wrong or a bad reaction because there was never a threat. There was never a threat, and yet we reacted as if there was one.
Yeah.
In the book where she talks about Hitler and Osama bin Laden on page 50 and 51, she talks about, or she implies about reincarnation, which I find really interesting. She talks about souls may go together, somebody decides they have to go back to Earth and live again to learn a lesson, or somebody will say, well, if you're going back, I'll go with you. I'm not sure how that goes with what we're talking about.
One of the when you start talking about stinkers and good stuff happening, bad stuff happening to good people, et cetera, the fancy pants theological term is theodicy. How do you explain that, my father died when I was 17 years old. He was the great crusading, liberal lawyer doing pro bono for the NAACP and for labor unions and workers and stuff. And I'm 17 years old and he just, dies. My reaction to that was, if God's not going to lift a finger, you quite frankly, God, you can go shove it. And I went through my atheist agnostic period and until in my mid-20s had several, and I certainly didn't will it, I didn't want it. I had several what I would call mystical experiences, and having a relationship with God was not on my bucket list, but and I don't think that this question of theodicy has ever really, we have, if free will, if there's free will, if there's free will, then you're going to have people making evil decisions or foolish decisions or selfish decisions, but then how does that explain, friends who I've had who had died of pancreatic cancer, and they only discover it when, they're already in stage 4 and stuff like that. So I don't think, for my money, there's some partial answers about these questions of theodicy, but nobody has nailed it. It really honestly is, it's beyond my, as it were, beyond my pay grade. So one of the ways which I think people a lot of times have dealt, I know James Dillard Freeman did. He wrote a wonderful book on reincarnation. Believed that, if you think there's more than one lifetime, or there's a divine spark which goes on and can be reincarnated, then then the poor person in Calcutta who is righteous and noble, not getting whatever, whereas the stinker on Wall Street gets everything. I mean, you start to see a logic to it. I do believe in out-of-body experiences. I do believe in near-death experiences and what we can learn from them. And so unity, you from the very beginning had some folks who really did believe in reincarnation and really saw this as, James Dillard Freeman was one of them, that if the soul is reincarnated in some form or in some way, and that this was not the end of this material world was not the end of the line, then a lot of things took on a different position, different color. I think the Fillmores were also vegetarians, and in a lot of very strict vegetarian. I mean, the original headquarters of Unity had a vegetarian restaurant, and there was a trolley which ran all the way around. In those days, ran around Kansas City, picking up people to go to the vegetarian restaurant. It was very, very popular. A moneymaker, by the way. But the Fillmores, as much as they believed in vegetarian, there's no sixth principle that to be in unity, you have to give up cheeseburgers, or a unity church which serves cheeseburgers or pepperoni pizzas are going to be thrown out of, or what. And I think they were very wise not to keep it simple, and the 5 principles, are that. So the same thing was on, a lot of folks in Unity have always believed in reincarnation and et cetera, et cetera. And they didn't make it one of, it's not one of them. I mean, to be in Unity, you have to believe in reincarnation. I remember when I was in Tulsa, I said from the pulpit, I do believe the divine spark goes on. It's beyond my pay grade. I do not. There's so much I do not understand and know, and I'm not even sure whether, if we are reincarnated, whether we're reincarnated on planet Earth. I don't believe this is the only universe. There are so many other places and levels where this divine spark could go. And as I was greeting people coming out, a man leaned over to me and he said, "I want to assure you, reincarnation happens and it's on planet Earth." I didn't ask him, is it in Oklahoma too? I should have asked him whether it's in Oklahoma, but I didn't ask that. But so does that end? I mean, and I'm glad that Unity, and that's the beauty of it, that we are open to it. There was a time when, even when I was an atheist, for some reason, I loved the St. Francis prayer, except the last line, and it is by dying that we enter eternal. And so my copy of back then of St. Francis prayer, I crossed out the last line, and now I love every line of the St. Francis prayer, and I am not 100% sure of. I do believe the divine spark goes on. How and what? I've only lived in a three-dimensional world, and if you add time, that's a 4th dimension. But but I believe there are probably many, many more dimensions, and many more, and there are a lot of planets in this universe. I guess you could be reincarnated, and a lot of others. But so I am open. I am open to that. And as I say, there are a lot of folks in Unity that would do strongly believe in reincarnation. Yes.
I did not believe in reincarnation, and I have problems. Well, not problems, but I don't always accept the theory of reincarnation. However, it's kind of weird that I say that because several years ago I was trying to get pregnant. After 7 years of fertility treatments, I finally got pregnant. Wahoo! 2 months later, I'm in the emergency room with an ectopic pregnancy. And before they wheeled me in, I had this dream. And it was this beautiful little girl who was about 4 or 5 years old, standing in front of the mirror, big hat, old big clothes, playing dress up. And she just said to me, "Mom, I can't do it right now." Now fast forward another 15, 20 years, and I meet the love of my life. We get married. We want to have children, but I'm way too old and I'm not able to make a child, so we agreed to adopt. My daughter was a month shy of being 5 when we met and she came to our home. She looks exactly like that child that came to me in a dream. So I have to believe that there's some connection. But is it reincarnation, or is it just her waiting and talking to me and letting me know that she was not ready at that time? But she is now, and she's been in my life for 14 years now.
Thank you. Wow. I go back to that line from Shakespeare so often: "There's more in heaven and earth than is dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio." And I will say that even though I think a lot of things are probably way beyond my pay grade, I have faith in God. As much as I know about God, it's been good, and I have faith that the stuff that I haven't fully comprehended is also good. I remember walking. This was in Virginia, and there was a pond, and there were fish in it, and I looked, and I remember one time thinking, "God, you fish, all you can see is this pond. You can't see I can see so much further than you fish." And then a few years later, walking beyond the pond, and I'd grown spiritually somewhat, I thought, you know what? I can see a little bit further than you fish, but quite frankly, not that much further. So, any other comments? So, I'm sorry, yeah, did you?
No, I think they took the microphone away.
Okay, there we go. So why don't we just close a moment? It's the meditation at the end of the chapter, so why don't we just center? I suggest you close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing it. Ellen writes, "As I turn within, I retreat from the outer awareness and enter soul, the divine in me. It is here that I know my connection to spirit. Deep within, I find the peace that passes all understanding. Deep within, I find the knowledge of all things and the awareness of absolute good. Deep within, I touch the gifts that are God. It is here that I receive wisdom and guidance, that I know truth and understanding, that I am strengthened and comforted. This is the divine essence that I am. The core of me is God, and from the God within, I can do all things. Centering on that Christ within, Buddha nature within, Atman within, higher self within, or as Aldous Huxley might put it, the perennial philosophy within. We gladly go into the silence. Dear Spirit, thank you for our many blessings and the fact that we were born fine the first time, that we truly are one with the one. And for this and so much more, we say thank you and amen and amen. Thank you all for being here tonight.